Sing it.
Because I'm going to try to. I think I'll sing it and then it will. This isn't live, so if I screw up, we can just cut it. That makes me feel better. So if after we listen to the lyrics, I'll just do mostly the first part.
Okay.
And then we can discuss it because it's going to get pretty deep. Art is dead. Art is dead. Entertainers like to seem complicated. When we're not complicated, I can explain it pretty easily. Have you ever been to a birthday party for children, and one of the children won't stop screaming because he's just a little attention attractor? And when he grows up to be a comic or actor, he'll be rewarded for never maturing, for never understanding or learning that every day can't be about him. There's other people. You selfish asshole. I must be psychotic. I must be demented to think that I'm worthy of all this attention, of all of this money you've worked really hard for. I slept in late while you worked at the drugstore. My drug's attention. I am an addict, but I get paid to indulge in my habits, and it's all an illusion. I'm wearing makeup. I'm wearing makeup, 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 makeup. Art is dead. So people think you're funny. How do we take those people's money? I said, art is dead. We're rolling in dough while Colin rolls in his grave. In his grave. I said the show has got a budget. The show has got a budget. And all of the poor people, way more deserving of the money, won't budget because I wanted my name in lights. When I could have fed a family of 4 for 40 freaking fortnights. 40 freaking fortnights. I am an artist, please don't forgive me. I am an artist, please don't revere me. I am an artist, please don't respect me. I am an artist, feel free to correct me. I am an artist, a self-obsessed artist. I am an artist, I am an artist. But I'm just a kid, I'm just a kid, I'm just a kid. And maybe I'll grow out of it. So that's the song.
I don't think this is a show about self-deprecating humor. That's not funny. It
isn't.
That's funny. Serious.
It is very serious, which was why at first I didn't exactly want to call it comedy. And when he opens up this song, what he actually says is, "All right, this song isn't very funny, but it helps me sleep at night." And then he plays it. And he's a comedian.
Yeah, it's a confessional, isn't it? Helps him sleep because he's telling his truth.
Yes. So it dives deep into, is this humor? Is this not humor? Because people laughed. The way I sing it.
Does he sing it? Does he sing it for laughs when he does it live?
Yes, he does it in a humorous type of tone.
Okay. So do you know a guy called Tim Minchin?
I do not.
Oh my God. Okay, he's an Aussie that's made his career in England, and he writes these very, in some ways, introspective comedy songs, but they're very musically brilliant, kind of rock songs, and he's got one that this one reminds me of, and I really wish I could come up with the name of it, where he talks about you know, he was this wannabe, basically he's this wannabe rock star, but he sings the whole song in the third person, right? He's talking about somebody else superficially, but he's obviously talking about himself. And then he even points out as the song goes on that to make himself sound smarter and bigger and more substantial, he writes in the third person. And he doesn't have the angst that makes great art because he was born middle class, and you know, et cetera, and it's very kind of it just reminded me of it. Tim Minchin, brilliant.
Tim Minchin?
Yeah,
maybe we could do an episode on him next.
Yeah, you know, we really could, because he's got a lot of things to say on religion and kind of political issues too. But he's very tongue-in-cheek, but he's also just lyrically brilliant, musically brilliant. Anyway, that's my big plug for Tim Minchin. But this song reminded me of some of Tim Minchin, and very interesting. Another great find, because I was thinking a bunch of things as you were playing that. Although actually, if you could bring the lyrics up again, that might be helpful.
Oh yes,
because I am already forgetting some of the things that. But you know what? So to your point there, to the answer to the question I just asked, you know that old cliche that 90% of all communication is non-verbal. It's not the content of the words. You as you told me that can be sung for laughs, played for laughs. The way, looking at the words, the black on the white or the gray here, and hearing just the acoustic, if anything, under emotional delivery, where the words just, the meanings not mediated by what you're doing, how you're moving, what's on your face, right? It's very, it's kind of serious. It's dark, I think is the word I want. It's a bit dark.
There's a part in the song where he has been kind of getting laughs, and he gets to a part where he says, it's all an illusion. I'm wearing makeup. I'm wearing makeup. I'm wearing makeup, 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 makeup. That part. And he is playing the piano, and he's banging on the keys almost in a frustrated, angry manner, where people are laughing and he's just like frustrated that they're laughing, when he's kind of giving a fashion where he's saying, I'm wearing makeup, 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 makeup. And then he goes back to his funny tone, do 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 do, art is dead, and then he goes back to a normal pitch. But the I'm wearing makeup part, he's really banging on the piano keys and singing with a lot of disdain.
Yeah, so it sounds like, perhaps, and I'm only again going on what you're telling me, that he's kind of showing you that he's doing this performance, and then he's kind of stops performing, and then he shows you some of who he really is, and then he goes back to performing. He catches himself and goes back, right? So he's kind of showing, in a way, consistent with the lyrics, the fakery, the illusion that is art, right? That is performance. Sounds maybe like he's actually performing the illusion of performance in a way.
Yes,
that's cool. I like that. I'm gonna have to watch after this show. I'm gonna actually have to watch him do it, because I'd be kind of interested in it. Yeah.
And the part at the end where he says, I'm just a kid and maybe I'll grow out of it, is looking to hope. He clearly understands. It's pretty clear to me that all he is he's a performer, and it's okay to be a performer. Performance, in my opinion, is worth more than money, because money, to me, and it might be easy to say this, one might call me privileged because I'm able to have money, even though my parents were pretty broke and my grandparents had to help them out a lot. But money doesn't mean much to me. If I had all the money in the world, but I didn't have happiness, it wouldn't mean much to me. I've always joked that I might be somewhat of a vagabond or a hobo if I didn't have all these family members in my life that would just be like, why are you a hobo? Like, what are you doing? Get your life together. If I was completely alone in the world, I would enjoy having no responsibilities, no consequences for my actions, maybe going to McDonald's every day, getting freelance work. It wouldn't.
Wow. Okay, so as you were saying that, sorry, can I share
a
thought?
ahead.
Okay. When we kind of met telephonically for the first time, Austin, we had a conversation about our Myers-Briggs personality types.
Oh, yes.
And I asked you if you were, I can't remember exactly how it went, but an ENTP, and you said sometimes you score ENTP, sometimes INTP, I think was basically what you said to me. And I'm an ENTP.
Depends on if I'm on drugs or not. If I'm on drugs, I'm an ENTP. If I'm not, I'm an INTP.
Oh, okay. That's it. Okay. Well, that should probably be a show right there. But okay. But the reason that came to my mind is, I've got quite a lot of the pure eternus in me, the young, the Jungian archetype, pure eternus, the eternal boy. And
is that Jung's, Carl Jung's?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wonder if, I'm sure there's a correlation between my ENTP-ness and my eternal boyness, and the eternal boy archetype is the person that loves to live in the possible, loves to have lots of things to choose from, have therefore a load of freedom. And the problem with being the pure eternus is that he likes to be able to do everything, to have all the options, but that stops him from kind of committing to any particular option, because in doing so, he eliminates a bunch of other options, right?
Yes.
And there's something in that is about the value of not taking responsibility. And this is what I was thinking as you were saying about, I could be a hobo or whatever.
Yes.
Because
I don't think I would literally choose to be that, but I definitely see value in it.
Right.
I definitely see positives.
No, indeed. Obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't have made that comment, I guess.
Yes.
And
something that's so overtly negative usually. Right,
indeed. And I think, for me, I couldn't do that because I would get the, I thought for a while I was going to make a life in Asia. And in I lived in Taiwan for a while, and I had the time of my life. Well, actually I didn't, but I thought it was, at the time, it was the time of my life, right? And it was too much fun, and it was too easy. And it was so comfortable that it got uncomfortable, right? And you know what I mean? And I pulled myself out of there because it was all dopamine and no serotonin, right? It was all hedonism and no meaning. And there's a certain kind of pleasure in meaning that I couldn't see myself really getting in that environment. So I made a huge effort to actually give up a load of the pleasures that I was experiencing day to day living in Asia, to immigrate to the United States and be more serious and all of that. So that need for meaning means that I couldn't be the hobo McDonald's guy, because I've got this ambition. I've had this sense since I was a kid that I've got to make a big difference. I've got to have a big life. I never knew what it meant, but I felt I needed to. And the reason I'm saying all of that is my manifestation of that pure eternus ENTP, maybe be a hobo, maybe work in McDonald's thing, is I think largely why I'm very wary of what marriage and children entail. And that goes back to our first ever show. Because the upside of the freedom that you lose when you make that kind of a commitment, no, not even make that kind of commitment, take on that kind of responsibility, that's a giving up of a massive upside. And I think sometimes I wonder if some of our problems don't come about from the fact that people don't realize exactly the magnitude of what they're giving up when they take on the responsibility, and therefore end up giving the responsibility up way too quickly and causing a lot of damage in their wake.
All right, this is a can of worms. I'm going to finish. I have a response to that, but I need to finish this point about
Please.
Him talking about he could have fed a family for 40 freaking fortnights. I said freaking. I don't know what we're doing on the swearing aspect. I would like it that the video isn't tagged. You have to be 18 plus because he said the F word.
Oh,
so
really?
I don't know what the rules are, but we'll go with that. He's talking about money, how he wasted all this money when he could have given it to poor people. And I just don't see the value in money as great as the value in inspiring someone, in making somebody smile, making somebody laugh. And I also think that money is a social tool that if people do not have it, it means they do not know how to use the tool. It does not mean that they do not have the tool.
Say that again. If they don't have it, it does mean they don't have it, doesn't it? By definition?
Well, money is a social. So, for example, what percentage of millionaires go broke? You give them the money, but they still don't have it because they don't know how to use it.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
You give somebody who knows how to use the social tool of money $1 million. They're going to take that money and they're going to make it last, even make more money, do something with it. People who play the lottery generally aren't the types of people that make smart financial decisions.
Yeah.
So when they get that money, there was this person who was clearly a social justice warrior who was complaining about how privileged people are who don't win the lottery and how miserable she is because she won the lottery, and how she wants to sue the lottery for how miserable it's made her life because she got something that she didn't know how to use.
Be careful what you wish for, because you may just get it, right?
Yeah, so money isn't – I hear all these people talking about the 1% having all the wealth, and I'm just like, wow, we're so privileged that we don't have all that money because we would be miserable with it.
I think it depends entirely how you get it. If I earned $1 billion, it would be completely different from if I was. I mean, I'd rather. But
what would you do with the billion?
Be given $1 billion.
What are you doing with the money though?
Well, that would be up for me. That would be up to me. I mean, I've never thought of what I would do with $1 billion because I'm not near to having $1 billion. So it's not worth my time thinking about.
I would reinvest it into happiness, and happiness to me isn't necessarily buying monetary things. I would buy monetary things. Don't get me wrong.
What do you mean? Do you mean material? Do you mean
materialistic things? Yeah. Everything.
Because
money,
all the studies show
everything.
That experiences give you more happiness than things, right?
Yes, I would buy things, and that's a cognitive error in my brain that I would buy things because I know that those things wouldn't make me happy. And I think that people who get jealous of other people that have things, it isn't, once they have it, it wouldn't make them happy. If you think something is going to, a materialistic thing is going to make you happy, you're going to be very disappointed when you have it. Yeah. The materialistic things that I would buy I would know going into it that it's not going to make much of a difference.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely true.
It's not going to be what I think because it's experiences. And that's why most comedians aren't very wealthy. Some of them are, at least for a very long time. You weren't a comedian because you were funny or because you wanted money. You were a comedian because it was your way of venting. It was a way of turning things into comedy and laughing and ignoring a part of your life and a part of the world. And I disagree with Bo Burnham about how he thinks that his self-centeredness, his artistry is selfish, or rather I should say that it's not helping anybody, that he's just helping himself because he is helping people in a way that's a lot more than money.
Yeah. So I guess then the question becomes, to what extent does that thing that he's identifying as selfish in himself, to what extent is it separable from the art and the inspiration that he provides? Because if it's not separable, then it's kind of, it has the moral justification in a way that he thinks that it and here is lacking. If it is separable, then perhaps he's indicating that as he grows, it will be separated. That for him, it will be one of the childish things that he puts away, to use the biblical line, which is also part of his journey, right? And his art is part of his journey.
His newest special, called Make Happy, is a really good special. I would recommend watching it. It's called Make Happy. Is at the end, he talks about how he was privileged. He got everything he wanted. He got lucky, and he's still unhappy.
I think being lucky, I mean, certainly for me, I would, every single thing I've had in my life, rightly or wrongly, I can experience as having earned. Like, I know the value of it because I worked.
The concept of luck is strange, because
it's not even, well, hold on, just before we talk about the concept of luck, I just wanted to say that if I won the lottery, my self-esteem, it would be very hard for me to keep the sense of myself that I have, that literally money can't buy, right? Because if it suddenly became easy for me to acquire because I was given the money with which I was investing, say, right? Or just given the money with which I could implement my idea, in a manner that nobody else was given the same resources, then I would always know I didn't do it. That would make me a lot more of a miserable person.
You don't have a sense of entitlement.
I do not have, I have a profound lack of a sense of entitlement. And that's not to say I haven't been privileged. I've been privileged in many ways in my life. But nobody and nothing owes me anything. And obviously I completely can see and admit that I have been given more than perhaps the next guy, but in as much as I still can, the feeling that I was never given a free lunch is very, very important to me. And that is why I wouldn't want to play the lottery in case I won.
Yes. Okay. So, man, I don't know how long we're going. I would say I've always wished. It's been, I want to say probably since I was like 12 years old. So always is an exaggeration there. But since I was about 12 years old, I really wished that I had a much more miserable life.
Ooh,
I wished I was born in Africa, or I was born somewhere on a different continent, because I have always had a very strong sense of wanting to achieve and wanting to compete and wanting to do well. And the older I got, the more it turned into a game in which I felt I had too much of a head start. I felt and kind of still feel badly about the social position I am in.
When you say badly, explain. Badly, what kind of badly? Guilt badly?
Guilt would be a good word. If I do something, I'm a straight white male. Like how it doesn't mean much. It's easy mode. I got life on easy mode, and I don't like that I got life on easy mode. I wish I would have started on hard mode. I want the challenge. I want to prove that my success isn't just because of my skin color or my gender, or I want to prove that if I have success, it's because of my knowledge and my willingness to succeed. And that's something that set me back very far in life, because it's something that I still haven't been able to process that guilt factor yet, which I'm eventually going to have to process. But that's something that I feel like Bo Burnham is kind of hitting on. And he talks about this in his specials, and he feels the same thing. He talks about how privileged he is and how lucky he got. He accredits his success to luck, which is a sure tell sign that there is that sense of feeling of guilt that he has, which I have also experienced. And also, any successful person I've ever talked to has failed hundreds of times over, thousands of times over. George Lucas sent in Star Wars to 74 places, I believe, before it was accepted. Usually 99.9 times out of 100, usually it's not luck that gets people places, it's persistence.
Why would you rather be born into a situation where your effort, the faculties that you do have, the work you do, is less able to get you out of that situation and maybe be turned into deeds that can positively affect the lives of other people? Because that, everybody has a varying degree of privilege. But as Jordan Peterson says, okay, so now go and earn the privilege. So for me, when I listen to what you say, which is fascinating to me, I am so grateful that and grateful is the word. I don't think there's any other word close to the emotion. That I had the good fortune to be brought up in a situation where, by working extremely hard and doing certain things and, whatever it is, taking advantage of my, aspects of my upbringing, I could go to Cambridge and be given the mind that I probably couldn't have got in almost every other part of the world. Now, is that good for me? Yeah, it's great. But is there a responsibility that comes with it? Yeah, I believe so. It plagued me. It was one of the reasons why I had to get out of Taiwan, because I had to do something with it. And I didn't feel I could do enough with it. And I didn't even know what it was I wanted to do with it, right? But I don't feel any guilt, because I've always been in a kind of an iterative process with between what I have and what I need to do, my opportunities and my duties or my responsibilities. And I think that is all any of us can do, right? And so I'm like, it's like you're talking about existential guilt. That must really suck, man. That must really suck. Yeah. I felt the push of where it comes from, the moral impetus you're talking about, but I've never, I would only feel guilty if I did nothing about it. But I think I'm guessing you're doing something about it, right? Maybe you don't feel you're doing enough, maybe.
That's what Bo Burnham feels, and that's what our generation, my generation, has had to kind of grow up with, because we have been told in the last 4 to 8 years, white people are responsible for slavery. White people are responsible for the suffering of, and I'm Irish, so can you get any more?
The whole thing's ridiculous.
Less privileged.
I mean, you can't make an argument.
The perspective,
like
yes, the perspective is wrong for sure. But it's something I've subconsciously had to sit with because of the era in which I've been.
That's really wow. Wow, you've said again, as you always do, Austin, you've opened up another great can of worms. You've opened up a few, actually, there.
But that's Bo Burnham. This is Bo Burnham. Existential guilt.
How old is he?
I want to say he's 25 or 26.
Okay, so yeah, he's your age. Okay, so he's at the back end of millennials, and it sucks to be a millennial, because you have been screwed as a generation, and you use the term generation, so I'm just going to run with it, right? Because I'm a Generation X, so and I'm going to crass
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, absolutely. The latchkey,
which I wish I would have had.
Didn't get a trophy for turning up, and that's really interesting, because I do look at your generation, and and this may say more about me than your generation. Obviously it's bound to, but to your point, and to respecting your point, as a Generation Xer, one of the problems, for example, I have with social media is, I think I might have mentioned to you before, Austin, that it seems to have an inherent narcissism in it, right? The idea that you could think that anybody wants to hear from you until you've proved that you've got something that nobody else has got, like, to me, it makes me deeply uncomfortable, but now it's the norm. You know, it's like, as a generation, on the one hand, you've been taught you can have everything. And then on the other hand, you've been taught, how dare you have anything? And I'm like, that absolutely sucks. And a number has been done on millennials. You know, you have to be guilty for being white. You have to be guilty for being male. And I'll say, well, it depends what you do with your whiteness, if whiteness is even a thing. And I'm kind of not even happy about that, because if you put that concept into your system conceptually, you'll get it out, right? If you put color in, your answers will be in terms of color, right? And I don't want to, like, you know, I know Stephen Colbert jokes about not seeing race, right? He's got that big joke, right? Well, you won't, but none of my American millennial listeners to this will believe what I'm about to say. But I didn't see race until I came to America and then started hanging out with millennials. I mean, literally, if you ask a Brit of my age who has friends of various colors, what color is such and such friend, it's possible that I would have to spend as long time thinking about that as I would his eye color, because it's just not. But we're drenched in it now in America, in you know, the millennials in America, and it's
because we talk about it. Morgan Freeman says, "Do you want to stop racism? Stop talking about it." And people don't like that answer, but I'll tell you what it does in sports, because you look at sports. Nobody talks about race. They talk about the sport. If they're playing basketball, they talk about basketball. And what that does is there is some underlying race issues in there that do need to be talked about at some point, and in fact are talked about on occasion. And it makes people uncomfortable, but they at least respect conversation. But it's not the overlying paradigm through which everything is seen. Yeah. It is a paradigm that is sometimes brought up to look at things from a different lens in specific instances. Whereas in our generation, the entire paradigm, the entire lens is privilege. That's the only way we look at things. But in sports, it's completely different, and I love it, because I can look at Kevin Love and I can look at LeBron James, and I cannot see black and white. I can see athletes, and people can talk about it almost as someone who came from this generation. I was brought to tears probably 2 years ago out of a random occurrence where there was a black commentator who was criticizing the performance of a black athlete and praising a white athlete without noticing that any color. He was just talking about the athletes. And
just to be clear, certainly in the country I come from, for most of my life, that's exactly what would happen. That wouldn't even be, no one would even notice that was happening, because the color isn't relevant. And it's such a shame what we've done here. Yeah, it's such a shame.
Whereas you would never see anyone black talk about somebody white in a good way and black in a bad way in any other worldview currently in the United States among millennials, unless it's in sports. Because in sports, they don't care what they judge you by who you are. And I love in sports how they're Stephen A. Smith and Skip, and they'll like some black players and like some white players and like white players and not like black players based completely on skill. It has nothing to do with their race, and it seems so self-evident, but it's something that's lost in society.
I think it's absolutely absurd that you and I, having a faintly intellectual discussion like we do, would even be saying this. The fact that we're even talking about like dividing athletes by color, even for the purposes of a discussion, is so completely effed up. And that is why, as you say to your earlier point, that racism is the thing, because as Goethe says, you see only what you know. So if you're going in knowing race as a means of identification, right, then that is what you see. And if you don't, then you don't. You
And
know,
when,
so it's
yeah,
it's just it's so
and
upsetting.
celebrities were fixing this because celebrities were becoming famous and people were recognizing people who were Black as celebrities and just being like, oh, okay, that's normal. And it wasn't really necessarily talked about. People were idolizing people that were Hispanic and African American and all of different in my younger generation, I should say, like
You mean
Will
when
Smith.
you mean when
When
you
I
were
was
a kid?
growing up,
Yeah,
when
right.
I was a kid, Will Smith. He
This has
was
got
huge idol.
crazy
I
in the
loved
last
Will
couple of
Smith.
years.
I loved Richard Pryor, which is not my generation, but
Sure.
he was somebody that transcends so many generations. No matter what generation you're part of, he's part of your childhood. Eddie Murphy. He was from my childhood. I have a ton more examples now, but these are just examples of people that I admired and looked up to as a kid before I even knew about this whole race thing, before I even saw any of it.
Right.
I just admired those people, and watching those people on TV basically trained my brain as a child to recognize that people were different shades of colors, but they're basically all the same. It's not any different.
You know, what you normalize is what you perpetuate, right?
Yes.
So if we as a culture normalize noticing the race of people before we notice anything else, then that perpetuates racism. If people who hate, want to get rid of racism, ultimately it's one day we all have to decide to stop normalizing the understanding of our world in terms of skin color. So unfortunately, that means that a lot of people who think they are fighting against racism have to stop doing exactly what they're doing right now.
Culture is the problem too.
Massively.
Because
massively, it's
the way we've treated African Americans particularly, and the way the laws are set up in poor cities are such that generations of African Americans are put into the same culture and it collectivizes them. Whereas, I didn't exactly notice that. I noticed the difference between ghetto and Black. They weren't the same in my mind. Carlton Banks from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or Childish Gambino. I was joking with my girlfriend. We were watching a video about Childish Gambino.
I don't know.
Do you know who he is? Again, Donald Glover. Donald Glover. He's clearly an African American, but he's just kind of stereotypically kind of white. I mean, he's a rapper, but he had to get his Black card as a rapper. He is so kind of stereotypically white in a way. His humor is really goofy, and he's very nerdy. So we're watching a video about Childish Gambino. Donald Glover, same guy, one's the artist, one's the comedian. He's a musical artist too. And they were showing all these facts, and one of the facts was he was the first Black director to get an Emmy or something. And my girlfriend was like, I didn't know Childish Gambino was the first Black guy to get an Emmy. And I'm like, I didn't know Childish Gambino was Black. Because I was playfully toying with the idea that why does his race matter? Why does it matter if he's why can't he just be it's almost degrading to him to say he's the first Black guy to do something. He's the first. Why not say he is a person who got a very honorable, prestigious award? He's one of the most talented people, in my opinion, on the planet right now. He's done so much. He's done acting. He's done rap. He's done old folk 60s, 70s type R&B music. He's directed a movie. He's going to be writing a upcoming animated film. He's one of my biggest inspirations because, like you, how you're interested in a ton of things and you want to be limited. You know how you said you were the child at heart, the Jung type? He's the epitome of that because he's done everything from music to writing to even he was on an intellectual show too. And the race thing, just bringing up his race to me is just a low blow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels insulting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think more people, I mean, it would be nice if more people were offended about, you know, the lazy, just the laziness of trying to understand the individual's experiences in terms of skin color or in ethnicity. And yes, of course, people with a certain skin color or ethnicity, you know, the distribution of their experiences is different for, yeah, of course. But as you say, well, that's about a lot of things, about the choices that are normalized within those cultures, for example, right? And
I grew up in a very multi-ethnic culture too, so I don't get it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, and it's kind of like, I mean, I know it's the original, you know, the American original sin, but it's also the present American psychopathology or cultural pathology. I mean, there's particular stories I can tell about that, not least because I made a good friend. I lived in Harlem, and I was on the, so I was like, you know, the only white guy in my building for quite a few years. And I made a friend. I'd been in Harlem for a few years, and I made a friend of an English Jamaican, right? So he was, you know, a black guy with dreads and whatever, but he was culturally English.
Yeah.
And
you notice culture way more than you do race, don't you?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Way more.
And he and I both, right? And he would tell me that he lived in, you know, the Jamaican part of Brooklyn. And so he would kind of come to me to visit me, and I would go to him to visit him. And it was like really funny because, I mean, this was a few years ago now, but my stop was 125th Street on the A train, right? Like you'd throw a stone to the Apollo. I mean, that was where I lived. And I love that because I like being a cultural outsider, because I love to learn what there is to learn when there's a big cultural gap between you and your environment. I love all that. I loved that in Asia. I loved it in Harlem. And I noticed, I noticed that I mean, pretty much the only time I would see a black guy and a white guy get out of that A train together, bros, you know, was when he and I got out of that A train together, which is completely, I mean, it was kind of completely crazy. But he would tell me some of the stories about walking down the street in his black neighborhood in Brooklyn. Everything was fine until he would walk down the street in his black neighborhood in Brooklyn with his white wife, or, and this was really interesting, with a Beatles shirt on. He was a music producer, and he would wear a Beatles shirt, and he said even that would get, he could read the reactions because he didn't have a rapper, he had the Beatles. And there was this, and sometimes he would be kind of verbally threatened, and he knew what it was about. Sometimes he would throw on a blazer like this, right? Like I say, kind of culturally English. Now, he wasn't culturally English like me. He came from Brixton, when Brixton was kind of a bit more like Compton, right? Yeah, Brixton in London. So, I mean, he came from the other side of the tracks. It was really interesting that he and I had very, very, very different subcultural upbringings, but kind of converged on so many things in the way that we viewed the world. It's one of the reasons why we became great friends, because we were so different but had similar views. But it was just fascinating to see that, you know, how he would feel as if it was signaled to him that he was a threat to his own community as a black guy when he walked down the street with his white wife. And it was upsetting to him. It was upsetting to me. And it was something he'd never experienced in England, because, as I think I mentioned to you before, if you close your eyes on the sidewalk in London, you can't hear the color of the people who are walking by you from their accent. But
That's
you can
true
in
for
this country,
that,
in most cases. Not in all cases.
Yes,
but
if you heard
with
Donald Glover talk, or Demetrius Johnson, or Sky Williams, I'm naming some nerdy black guys that I watch and I know of. I gave very obscure examples that probably no one's going to know about, because one of them's an MMA fighter and one of them's a Twitch streamer. He plays a video game, but they're just people that come to mind where you close your eyes and you're like, that is definitely Bill Gates. That's a very, very nerdy white man.
Which goes to show, right? Which goes to show.
Not.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
because it's culture. And
yeah,
United States culture, we do have a problem with the African American community in regards to how we treat that culture and how the laws, like, I don't want to get political, but like, why are the laws stricter in a place where people aren't able to even keep up with the basic functions? Why are we giving people speeding tickets when there's a problem with murder? Like, it seems reversed to me.
Did I share my experience with you about that I had down at Netroots?
No, you didn't.
Okay, so this is this is the most personal experience I've had of this, even having lived in Harlem.
Can we make sure we're under 2 hours real quick?
Oh, I don't even know. Where are we at, Austin? Are we close to that?
Can you, I don't know. I don't know if
well, we can, I'll tell this little story and then we can round it up and,
all right. What time did we
I
start?
I think it's probably more like just over an hour, I think.
All right.
All right. So things have changed a lot, even in the last 2 years, with respect to the rise of identitarian politics. And I have an easy way to test that, of course, because, I go and give these presentations about political communication, and what comes back to me from the audience, the questions and the comments are different that reflect the times. And there's been a step change even in the last 2 years. But I was at Netroots, which I would say is kind of quite a hard left conference. I think most people would say it was a hard left conference in Atlanta. And I was at the opening ceremony. This was this year, a few months ago. And I was at the opening ceremony. There were thousands of people of diverse ethnicities in the opening ceremony. I'm going to say a couple of thousand people. And we listened to speeches by all kinds of, left-wing, progressive politicians, figures. It was very interesting. And at the end, Black Lives Matter were given the stage. Now, I have heard, I had never interacted with Black Lives Matter, and I had heard folks, if I was going to pigeonhole them on the right, oh, they're a terrorist organization, and I never believed that kind of hyperbole. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, I'm in a room.
Depends on what in-group or out-group.
Well, indeed. So I discover, right?
Yeah. But overall, I think they're a good organization overall.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I discovered. I'll tell you what my experience of them was. My one. Okay. Well, I had two experiences of them, both of which were shocking. This was the first. This room of 2,000 people were told that white people were to be excluded from a series of their meetings from the stage. And that we had to be okay with it, and we had to understand why that had to be done. And that wasn't all there was to it. But I was like, hold on, there was an explicit, here's what there was an explicit statement of the need for racial segregation. And then there was the explicit demand that people on the negative end of that, on the excluded end of that, comply. Now, I have never felt in my life the need to be involved in any kind of racial politics until that moment. Because in that moment, I was being told, even though I didn't ask for it, that I was going to be excluded from political discussion based on my skin color, which I do not think is a basis for inclusion or exclusion from any discussion.
That's a slippery slope to the Holocaust.
And that's a slippery slope. And so the reason that was scary to me was because there were 2,000 people in that room who either had to concede the principle that racial segregation is not a way to solve problems, or they had to stick with it and say, no, sorry, we won't go there with you. And this was mainstream. Was a mainstream, although, as I say, quite hard left conference. And sure enough, as the conference went on, I witnessed what was being written on the signs, the violent words, slogans that were being put on the signs, some of which were racially charged. I saw the T-shirts that people were wearing, and it was made very clear that I don't want to quite say there was a target on my back by virtue of my skin color, but it was made kind of clear that that's the next step. that we get in line or we don't get to choose what happens next. That was pretty much explicit. And if we had a longer time, I would tell you the other shocking story that I, experienced in Netroots that relates to that, but maybe we'll keep it for another show. So I actually said to my friend, my colleague, Dan Johnson, that I work with, who was there in that conference with me. I said, this is the first time in my 7 years of being involved in American politics that I have actually felt physically threatened. And it was as a result of what I heard from people who self-identify Black Lives Matter. And I know it's a movement, and anybody can self-identify. And I'm not going to draw a conclusion about all the people in the movement, but I'm just going to say that was a moment for me that I will never forget, because 2,000 people, if they were appalled, they didn't say anything. I know I was, and I know the few people I spoke to who weren't, let's say, cut from the same political cloth, were also horrified. I was in a room with a bunch of racial segregationists stroke supremacists, and I didn't like it any more than I would have been if they were white, green, yellow, purple, or any color you pick. It's all the same. And it was a scary thing for me.
I think the way it's a complex situation to understand, but the way you break it down is by mixed races. You ask them, you show them that their logic has paradoxes in it by bringing up mixed race. 67% African American, 23% Mexican, 10% Native American. Is he part of the group or no?
I'm with you. Well, the entire thing is a logical absurdity. I'm with you entirely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's just a way that proves with what
it's good.
With what I guess Aristotle would call observable science instead of intuitive science.
Be clear though that a lot of these people, and I spoke to some of them, which is why I'm going to make this generalization, would say, just because I can't answer that specific question, it doesn't matter, because it's okay you have to break eggs to make omelets. So even if we don't get it right at the margins, the bigger point that justifies this rather inhumane approach to a complex social issue is better than not. So it doesn't matter who gets hurt along the way. Sorry, some people will. And it's very dangerous, because it's that kind of political scientism that I wrote about in that article.
The way to fix that, I'm going to say the same thing. So basically, let's say we're on the reverse side of things. In the future, African Americans are racist against white people. It's the exact opposite. We do a flip.
Well, hold on. That's the opposite of what? Because they're proportionally, there's no fewer racist people of one color than of another color. Well, I don't accept it. I just don't. You got to give me evidence of that.
Slavery.
Well, nobody's holding slaves right. Nobody's holding slaves right now. That was done years ago.
There is still a residual effect, and there are people.
Nobody's arguing that. That's a very different thing. Nobody's arguing against that. Right?
Yes,
right. But you just said something that I thought was a very big thing that needed to be just flagged. Right. Okay, you can't say that if, like you said that, when black people become racist, that will be the reverse of today. I deny that. Right. Okay, and the fact that there was slavery doesn't change my denial.
Let me rephrase. If we get to a point where the norm is where the social norm or the left or democratic norm is the reverse of what it is now, where it is assumed that people are racist against blacks.
Okay.
Because of a large majority of people, or because of slavery or the like. When we get to a point where it is assumed that African Americans, black people are racist against white people, I think the solution there is still like sports. Connecting with people, creating empathy with people, making friends with people who are the opposite skin color.
Absolutely.
Getting to know people. Because arguments won't work. Arguments aren't going to work. What's going to work is having a best friend who is white when you're black, and the neurons in your brain going through a dorsal pathway and you understanding this person is good because he's my friend. And then, so arguments, I don't like.
Exactly right. So
I don't like arguing against people who say they're racist. What I like is go make a friend with one of those guys. That's what I would have won. I would have made a friendship with that person.
That's exactly right.
And I would have really talked to them and tried to change their mind.
That's exactly what I say in my article. Your problem with guns or gays is not political, right? The ultimate answer is relationship, because what you think may be a political difference is usually a subcultural difference in disguise with a kind of a cognitive overlay on it, which sounds political. But you're right, because when you make an argument about all white people or all black people or all men or all women or all English people, right? And then one or two, and through your personal knowledge, that general statement is absurd.
And make sure you're not a stereotype. Make sure you're not 100% stereotypical representation of your gender or race, because that actually might not be helpful.
But still, relationship is the answer.
Yes,
it's actually human lived experience of other humans, rather than abstracting.
Empathy creates empathy.
Absolutely.
And I love empathy is that. Yeah. We're agreed.
I did that because I know we have to draw this show to a close.
Yes.
And we've opened cans of worms, but that's a beautiful place to end.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty much that what you've just said pretty much is what drives all of my work in politics. So if we're going to come back to start open these cans of worms again, what a lovely place to start from, the fundamental truth.
All right. So that was our show. That started with Bo Burnham. That was, we're talking about Bo Burnham's existential grief within himself from that song. And I thought we stayed on topic. I thought we kept it with his existential grief. He has a song called Straight White Male. He has a lot of other songs that show that song is a lot about what we were talking about. His beliefs are very stemmed in an existential guilt. So I thought that we did a good job of representing Bo Burnham's natural tendencies to think of himself as lucky and privileged and thus attack himself on the basis of not feeling worthy and draw that into race. I thought we stayed on topic.
And in as much as we ever do, I think we have a loose definition of that, but I'm cool with that. And I have remembered the song, Tim Minchin's song. It is called Rock and Roll Nerd. Rock and Roll Nerd. I'm pretty sure that's the name of it. If not, that's the main refrain.
What are we doing next Thursday? 2 weeks Thursday?
A week this Thursday, I think, right? Hopefully we'll get the artwork, we'll get our platform sorted. And
let's do that episode. You can show me the song. Hopefully my singing wasn't too bad. It was in a lower key
there,
than I was expected. I wasn't prepared for it to be that low. But maybe the fact that I had to make an argument that we were staying on topic means we weren't on topic. No matter how good the argument is, the fact that I actually had to present one. But patreon.com/no-occasion. I don't think it's to shout. I think it's just no occasion.
No occasion. Because patreon.com/no occasion. And, it's worth saying we've started to put a little bit of resources into this. We are going to need some resources, just a little, to keep this going. We're converging on something that I think is going to be good. So if you would like us to keep trying to converge, you being our audience, our listenership right now, please consider throwing a couple of bucks at that Patreon page.
And what do you want next? And do you like the long format? I don't know how this was 2 hours. Do you like the long format versus the short format that has a lot of editing? I know the editing is very hard on my part, but if it's worth it to you, if the short content is better,
well, look,
then
Austin,
tell me and it might sway me. But
let us say, if they like the shorter version, then they need to throw the couple of bucks in so we can get enough to buy you a new computer so that it doesn't crash when you're using your editing software.
Or actually, all I really need is a external hard drive, because it's not the performance of my computer, it's the memory of my computer.
Indeed.
So less money for you guys.
Yes.
All right. And that is our show. See you guys next week. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us anything you want to review next. A celebrity, public figure, or anything having to do with pop culture that we can
make all philosophical. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that can launch us into metaphysics or epistemology or whatever it may be. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks, Robin. All right.